The door slammed behind Theresa Emerson with such force that the wood cracked, and she stood trembling on the dirt path outside the house she had called home for 3 years, clutching her swollen belly as rain began to fall from the darkening Colorado sky. Her husband's final words echoed in her ears, venomous and cruel, accusing her of carrying another man's child, though she had never once strayed from their marriage bed. Michael had changed after the mining accident left him unable to work, his frustration and anger growing with each passing month until tonight, when he had finally erupted into violence and thrown her out into the October evening of 1883, with nothing but the thin cotton dress on her back. Theresa stumbled down the muddy street of Las Animas, Colorado, her bare feet already numb from the cold as the rain intensified. She was 6 months pregnant, alone, and had nowhere to go. Her parents had died 2 winters ago from influenza, and her only sister had moved to California years before. The few friends she had made in town would never dare cross Michael by taking her in, not when he still held influence at the saloon where most of the men gathered. Her teeth chattered as she wrapped her arms around herself, trying to preserve what little warmth remained in her body. The sky had turned an angry gray, and thunder rumbled in the distance, promising a storm that would drench the High Plains town thoroughly before morning. She did not know where her feet were taking her, only that she had to keep moving or collapse entirely. The main street gave way to the outskirts of town, where scattered homesteads dotted the landscape. Her vision blurred with tears and rain, and she could feel her strength fading with each step. The baby kicked inside her, as if protesting the cold and chaos, and Theresa felt a sob tear from her throat. What would become of them? How could she protect her child when she could barely stand? The world tilted suddenly, and Theresa felt her knees buckle. She caught herself against a fence post, gasping for breath, her whole body shaking violently now. The rain had soaked through her dress completely, and the October wind cut through the fabric like a knife. She tried to take another step, but found she could not. Her legs simply would not obey anymore. Darkness crept in at the edges of her vision, and she felt herself sliding down the fence post toward the muddy ground. "Madam, madam, can you hear me?" The voice seemed to come from very far away, deep and rough but threaded with concern. Theresa tried to focus her eyes and saw a tall figure approaching on horseback, rain dripping from the wide brim of his hat. He dismounted in one fluid motion and was beside her in an instant, his strong hand steadying her before she could fall completely. "Good Lord, you are freezing," the man said, and Theresa found herself looking up into a weathered face with striking gray eyes that held genuine worry. He was perhaps 30 years old, with dark hair curling slightly at the collar of his duster and a jaw shadowed with stubble. "What are you doing out here in this storm? Where is your coat?" Theresa tried to speak, but her teeth were chattering too hard to form words. She saw his gaze drop to her swollen belly, then back to her face, and something shifted in his expression, a hardening of resolve. "Never mind explaining right now," he said firmly. "You are coming with me before you catch your death. My place is just over that rise." When she did not respond, still shaking too violently to move on her own, he made a decision. "I am going to lift you onto my horse. My name is Nathan Tucker, and I promise you are safe with me." Before Theresa could process his words, Nathan had scooped her up as easily as if she weighed nothing at all, pregnancy and all, and settled her onto his horse. He swung up behind her, wrapping his duster around them both and pulling her back against his chest to share his warmth. She could feel the solid strength of him, and despite her terror and confusion, something in her relaxed slightly. He clicked his tongue and urged the horse forward at a careful pace, one arm wrapped securely around her waist to keep her steady. "Come home with me now," Nathan said quietly near her ear, his voice rough but gentle. "You can tell me everything once you are warm and dry. Whatever trouble brought you out here, we will figure it out. But first, we get you safe." The ride could not have taken more than 10 minutes, but to Theresa it felt like hours. She drifted in and out of awareness, conscious only of the rain, the cold, and the warmth of the man behind her. When they finally stopped, she looked up to see a well-maintained homestead with a barn, a sturdy house, and several corrals. Nathan dismounted and lifted her down carefully, then practically carried her up the porch steps and through the front door. The interior of the house was simple but clean, with a large stone fireplace that still held glowing embers from an earlier fire. Nathan guided Theresa to a chair near the hearth and immediately set about building up the flames. Once the fire was roaring, he disappeared into another room and returned with an armful of blankets and what looked like a woman's nightgown and robe. "These were my sisters," he explained, setting them on the chair beside her. "She lived here with me until she married last spring and moved to Denver. The bedroom is just through that door. You need to get out of those wet clothes before you make yourself sick. Can you manage, or do you need help?" Theresa finally found her voice, though it came out hoarse and broken. "I can manage, thank you." Nathan nodded and turned his back, busying himself with the fire. "I will be right here. Call out if you need anything. Once you are changed, I will make you something hot to drink." Theresa made her way to the bedroom on trembling legs, her body still racked with shivers. The room was small but comfortable, with a large bed covered in a colorful quilt. She peeled off her soaking dress with numb fingers, the fabric clinging stubbornly to her skin. The nightgown was soft flannel, warm and modest, and she pulled it over her head gratefully. The robe followed, and she wrapped herself in one of the blankets Nathan had provided before making her way back to the main room. Nathan had placed a chair close to the fire and gestured for her to sit. He handed her a cup of hot coffee, sweetened with sugar and cream, and she wrapped her hands around it, absorbing the warmth. They sat in silence for several minutes while Theresa drank, and the feeling gradually returned to her extremities. The baby kicked again, and she placed a hand over her belly, reassuring herself that the child was still moving, still alive despite the ordeal. "Thank you," she finally said, looking up at Nathan, who sat in a chair across from her, watching her with those steady gray eyes. "You saved my life. Both our lives. You want to tell me what happened?" Nathan asked gently. "Why you were out in that storm with no coat, no shoes, looking like the devil himself was chasing you?" The tears came then, hot and fast, and Theresa could not stop them. The story poured out of her in broken sentences and gasping sobs. How she had married Michael Emerson 3 years ago, believing him to be a good man. How he had worked in the silver mines until an accident left him with a damaged back that prevented him from doing hard labor. How he had grown bitter and angry, drinking more and working less. How tonight he had convinced himself that the baby she carried could not be his, that she must have been unfaithful, and how he had struck her and thrown her out of their home, threatening to kill her if she ever returned. Nathan listened without interruption, his jaw tightening with each detail. When she finished, he leaned forward and spoke with quiet intensity. "Michael Emerson is a coward and a fool," he said. "No real man lays hands on a woman, especially not one carrying his child. You cannot go back there, not ever. Do you have family? Somewhere else you can go." Theresa shook her head. "No one. My parents are dead, my sister is in California, and I have not heard from her in over a year. I do not even know her address anymore." Nathan was quiet for a long moment, his gaze moving from her face to the fire and back again. "Then you will stay here," he said finally, his tone brooking no argument. At least until the baby is born and you are strong enough to decide what you want to do next. I have the room, and it would not be right to turn you out when you have nowhere to go." "I cannot ask that of you," Theresa protested, though her heart leaped at the offer. "You do not even know me. The scandal alone would ruin your reputation in town." "I do not much care what people in town think," Nathan replied with a slight smile. "I keep to myself mostly, run my cattle, and mind my own business. Anyone who wants to judge can do so from a distance. As for not knowing you, well, we will get to know each other. I figure anyone willing to walk through a storm pregnant and barefoot rather than stay somewhere she is being hurt is someone worth knowing." Theresa felt fresh tears spill down her cheeks, but these were different, born of relief and gratitude rather than fear and despair. "I do not know how I will ever repay you." "You do not need to repay anything," Nathan said firmly. "Now you look exhausted. When did you last eat?" Theresa thought back and realized she had not eaten since a meager breakfast that morning, nearly 12 hours ago. Her stomach growled in response to the thought, and Nathan stood immediately. "I will fix you something. Not much of a cook, but I can manage eggs and bread well enough. You just sit there and stay warm." As Nathan moved about the small kitchen area, Theresa watched him with growing curiosity. He moved with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own space, and she noticed details she had missed before. The house was remarkably clean for a bachelor homestead, with books lining a shelf near the window and curtains that, while simple, showed someone had taken care to make the place a home rather than just a shelter. There were no dirty dishes stacked up, no clutter or disorder. Nathan Tucker clearly took pride in his surroundings. He brought her a plate with scrambled eggs, thick slices of bread with butter, and some preserved peaches from a jar. Theresa ate ravenously, barely pausing between bites, and Nathan watched with satisfaction. "When did you say the baby was due?" he asked as she finished the last of the peaches. "January," Theresa replied, resting her hand on her belly. "Middle of January, the doctor thought. That gives us about 3 months to get everything ready," Nathan said thoughtfully. "There is plenty of time to make proper preparations. Tomorrow, if you are feeling up to it, we can go through my sister's things. She left quite a bit behind when she moved, said she wanted to start fresh. You should be able to find whatever you need among her clothes and such." "Are you certain about this?" Theresa asked, searching his face. "You really do not mind a stranger staying in your home?" Nathan met her gaze directly. "I am certain. My mama raised me to believe that when someone needs help, you give it. No questions, no conditions. She would roll over in her grave if she thought I left a pregnant woman out in the cold. Besides," he added with a hint of humor, "it will be nice to have someone to talk to besides the cattle and my horse." Despite everything, Theresa found herself smiling slightly. "I suppose I can provide conversation in exchange for room and board." "There you go," Nathan said, his expression warming. "Now you should get some rest. You have been through quite an ordeal. Take the bedroom. I will sleep out here on the sofa. It is plenty comfortable." "I cannot take your bed," Theresa protested, but Nathan was already standing, making it clear the discussion was over. "You can and you will. A pregnant woman needs proper rest. I will not hear any arguments about it." His tone was gentle but firm, and Theresa realized that beneath Nathan Tucker's quiet demeanor was a core of steel. He had made up his mind, and that was that. Too exhausted to argue further, Theresa made her way back to the bedroom. She climbed into the bed, and the mattress was softer than anything she had slept on in years. Michael had spent what little money they had on whiskey rather than household necessities, and their bed had been a thin, lumpy affair. This one cradled her body comfortably, and with the warm blankets pulled up around her and the sound of rain on the roof, She felt safe for the first time in months. Her last thought before sleep claimed her was that Nathan Tucker's eyes had held more kindness in them than her husband's had ever shown. Even in the early days of their marriage, Theresa woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of coffee and bacon. For a moment she was disoriented, unsure where she was, and then memory flooded back. She sat up carefully, her body sore and her feet tender from the previous night's ordeal. But she was warm, dry, and safe. She could hear Nathan moving around in the main room, and she rose slowly, wrapping herself in the robe before venturing out. Nathan looked up from the stove as she emerged, and his face relaxed into a smile. "Good morning. I was beginning to wonder if I should check on you, but I figured you needed the sleep. How are you feeling?" "Sore, but better than I have any right to feel after last night," Theresa admitted. "What time is it?" "Nearly 9 o'clock. You slept for almost 12 hours. Breakfast is just about ready if you are hungry." Theresa discovered she was ravenous again, and she sat at the small table while Nathan served up bacon, eggs, and biscuits with gravy. The food was simple but well prepared, and she ate with more appetite than she had shown in weeks. "I need to ride out and check on the cattle today," Nathan said as they ate. "But I want you to stay here and rest. You can look through my sister's things if you like. Her trunk is in the corner of the bedroom, and there is another in the closet. Take whatever you need or want." Catherine would be happy to know her things were going to good use. "Catherine," Theresa repeated. "That is a pretty name." "She is a good person," Nathan said with obvious affection. "Stubborn as a mule but good-hearted. She would like you, I think." After Nathan left, Theresa explored the small house more thoroughly. It was clear that it had been built with care and maintained with attention. The furniture was sturdy and practical, the floors clean swept, and everything had its place. She found Catherine's trunks and opened them to discover a treasure trove of clothing, all neatly folded and stored with sachets of lavender to keep them fresh. There were simple day dresses and work dresses, a few fancier gowns that must have been for special occasions, nightgowns, undergarments, shawls, and even a winter coat that would fit over her pregnant belly. Theresa tried on several dresses and found that while Catherine had been slightly taller than her, the clothing fit well enough, especially the looser styles that accommodated her changing shape. At the bottom of one trunk, she found something that made her catch her breath. It was a tiny knitted blanket in soft yellow wool, with matching booties and a little cap. There was a note pinned to it in feminine handwriting that read, "For whenever the day comes that I become an aunt. With love, Catherine." Theresa held the baby clothes to her chest and felt tears sting her eyes again. The kindness of strangers, people she had never met, was overwhelming after months of living with Michael's cruelty and indifference. She carefully set the baby things aside and made a mental note to ask Nathan about them. Perhaps Catherine had intended them for future nieces and nephews that Nathan might have. The thought that Nathan was unmarried at 30 was curious, but Theresa supposed he had his reasons for remaining a bachelor. She spent the rest of the morning making herself useful, tidying the already clean house and preparing a proper noon meal. It felt good to be doing something productive, to be contributing in some small way to the household that had taken her in. She found a basket of vegetables in the root cellar and made a hearty stew with beef from the cold box, setting it to simmer on the stove. Nathan returned in the early afternoon, stamping the dust from his boots on the porch before entering. He looked surprised but pleased to see the house in order and smell the stew cooking. "You did not need to do all this," he said, hanging his hat on a peg by the door. "You should be resting." "I have been resting all morning," Theresa replied. "I needed to do something to feel useful. I cannot just sit idle while you are out working. Besides, Cooking and keeping house is something I can do, especially now before the baby comes." Nathan looked as if he wanted to argue, but then he simply nodded. "Well, it smells delicious. I appreciate it." They fell into an easy routine over the following days. Nathan would rise early and tend to his livestock and land, while Theresa managed the house and prepared meals. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire and talk, sharing stories about their lives. Theresa learned that Nathan had grown up on this land, that his father had homesteaded it in the 1860s after the war. His parents had both died within a year of each other 5 years ago, leaving the property to Nathan and Catherine. Catherine had stayed to help him run the place until she met a merchant from Denver and fell in love. "You miss her?" Theresa asked one evening as they sat with coffee after supper. "Every day," Nathan admitted, "but I am glad she found happiness. She deserves it. She sacrificed a lot staying here to help me after our parents died. I told her she should have gone to live her own life sooner, but she is loyal to a fault, my sister." "You are close then?" "Very. She writes every week, tells me all about life in the city. I visit when I can, though I prefer it out here. Too many people in Denver for my taste." Theresa could understand that. She had grown up in a small town herself, and found Las Animas to be just the right size until Michael had made it intolerable. Now, sitting in Nathan's comfortable home with the fire crackling and the night settling in around them, she felt more at peace than she had in years. "Can I ask you something?" she ventured after a moment of comfortable silence. "Of course. Why have you never married? You have a good home, good land, and you are a kind man. I cannot imagine women have not noticed." Nathan smiled slightly, his gaze fixed on the fire. "There was someone once. Her name was Margaret. We were planning to marry, but she died of scarlet fever the winter before the wedding. After that, I just never found anyone who made me want to try again. Came close a few times, but it never felt right. I figured if it was meant to happen, it would." "I am sorry about Margaret," Theresa said softly. "It was a long time ago, 10 years now. I like to think she would be happy knowing I am doing all right." He looked over at Theresa then, his gray eyes thoughtful. "What about you? How did you end up with Michael Emerson?" Theresa sighed, pulling her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "I was young and foolish. My parents had just died, and I was alone and scared. Michael seemed charming at first, attentive. He courted me properly, or so I thought. It was not until after we married that I saw his true nature. The drinking was always there, but it got worse. And when he could not work anymore after the accident, he blamed everyone but himself for his troubles." "He should have protected you, not hurt you," Nathan said quietly. "That is what a husband is supposed to do, protect and cherish his wife." "I know that now. I was foolish to stay as long as I did." "You were doing the best you could in a bad situation. That is not foolishness. That is survival." His words settled something inside Theresa, a knot of guilt and shame she had been carrying. Nathan had a way of saying things simply and directly that cut through all the confusion and self-doubt. The weeks passed, and October gave way to November. The weather turned colder, and the first snows dusted the plains. Theresa's belly grew larger, and Nathan made sure she wanted for nothing. He brought in extra firewood, stored up provisions for the winter, and even built a cradle in the barn during his spare hours, presenting it to her one evening with a shy pride that made her heart swell. "I am not the best carpenter," he said as he set it near the fire, "but it is sturdy. I tested it myself. Your baby will be safe sleeping in this." Theresa ran her hands over the smooth wood, noting the care that had gone into every joint and curve. "It is perfect, Nathan, truly." She looked up at him, and their eyes met across the small space. Something passed between them in that moment, something neither of them was quite ready to name, but both felt nonetheless. Nathan cleared his throat and stepped back. I am glad you like it. I will move it into the bedroom for you. As November progressed into December, Theresa found herself thinking more and more about Nathan. It was impossible not to notice how gentle he was despite his size and strength, how he always made sure she was comfortable before seeing to his own needs, how he talked to her as an equal rather than a possession. She caught herself watching him sometimes when he did not know she was looking, admiring the way he moved with such easy grace, the way his face softened when he smiled, the kindness in his eyes. It frightened her, these feelings. She was still legally married to Michael, even if he had thrown her out. She was pregnant with another man's child. She had no right to be thinking about Nathan Tucker in any way other than as the good man who had rescued her. Yet the thoughts persisted, growing stronger with each passing day. One evening in mid-December, as they sat by the fire after supper, Nathan broke the comfortable silence with an unexpected question. Theresa, have you thought about what you will do after the baby is born? The question caught her off guard. She had been so focused on simply surviving day to day that she had not let herself think too far ahead. I suppose I will need to find work somehow, save money. Perhaps eventually I can get a small place of my own. Nathan was quiet for a moment, turning his coffee cup in his hands. What if you did not have to leave? Theresa's heart began to beat faster. What do you mean? He looked at her then, and she saw uncertainty in his expression, as if he was about to take a leap into unknown territory. I mean, what if you stayed here, permanently, you and the baby both? Nathan, I cannot keep imposing on your charity forever. It would not be charity. He set down his cup and leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. Theresa, these past 2 months have been the best I have had in years. Having you here, talking with you, sharing meals, it has made this house feel like a home again instead of just a place I sleep. I know the situation is complicated, but I have grown to care about you, more than I probably should, given the circumstances. Theresa's breath caught in her throat. Nathan, let me finish, he said gently. I am not asking for anything from you except your company, but if you were willing, I would like you to stay. We could figure out the legal matters with Michael, get you a divorce or an annulment or whatever is needed. It might take time, but it can be done. And in the meantime, you would be safe here, you and your baby both. Why would you do that for me? Theresa asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Because somewhere along the way I started to fall in love with you, Nathan said simply. I did not plan it, did not expect it, but there it is. I think about you all day when I am out working. I look forward to coming home because I know you will be here. I find myself wanting to make you smile, to hear you laugh. If that is not love, I do not know what is. Tears streamed down Theresa's face and she pressed a hand to her mouth. I do not deserve your love. I am married to another man carrying his child. I have nothing to offer you. Nathan moved from his chair to kneel beside hers, taking her hands in his. You have everything to offer. Your strength, your kindness, your spirit that would not break even when you were at your lowest. I do not care about Michael Emerson or his child except that they are part of your story, part of what made you who you are. If you can find it in yourself to care for me even half as much as I care for you, that would be enough. Half. Theresa let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Nathan, I have been falling in love with you since the day you found me. I tried not to because it seemed so wrong, so impossible. But every time you smile at me, every time you show me some small kindness, I fall a little more. I do not deserve you. Yes, you do, Nathan said firmly. He reached up and cupped her face in his calloused hands, wiping away her tears with his thumbs. You deserve everything good this world has to offer, and if you will let me, I want to spend the rest of my life making sure you have it. Yes, Theresa whispered. Yes, I will stay. I want to stay. Nathan's face transformed with joy, and he leaned forward to press his forehead against hers. They stayed like that for a long moment, breathing together, adjusting to this new understanding between them. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling through their tears. "We will do this right," Nathan promised. "First thing comes spring, when travel is easier, we will go to town and see a lawyer about getting you free of Michael legally. It might take time, but I am a patient man. I have waited 10 years to feel this way about someone. I can wait as long as it takes." Christmas came, and Nathan brought home a small pine tree that they decorated with strings of popcorn and paper stars. It was simple but beautiful, and Theresa felt happiness bubble up inside her as they worked together. On Christmas morning, Nathan presented her with a gift wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a beautiful shawl in deep blue wool, soft and warm. "I had Mrs. Patterson at the dry goods store order it special," he explained. "I thought the color would suit you." "It is beautiful," Theresa said, immediately wrapping it around her shoulders. "I did not get you anything." "I did not think. You being here is gift enough," Nathan said sincerely, and Theresa felt her eyes fill with tears again. She seemed to cry at everything these days, but Nathan never minded. He would simply hand her his handkerchief and wait patiently until she composed herself. They spent a quiet Christmas day together, cooking a special meal and enjoying each other's company. That evening, as they sat by the fire, Theresa felt the baby kick particularly hard. She gasped and placed a hand over her belly. "Are you all right?" Nathan asked immediately, concern in his voice. "Yes, the baby is just very active tonight," she smiled at him. "Would you like to feel?" Nathan looked uncertain. "Are you sure that is proper? We are going to be a family, Nathan. Of course it is proper." He moved his chair closer and tentatively placed his hand where she guided it on her belly. His eyes widened as the baby kicked against his palm. "That is incredible, so strong already. This child is going to be a fighter," Theresa said with a laugh. "Takes after its mother, I suppose." "Nothing wrong with that," Nathan said, his hand still resting gently on her belly. "Strong and stubborn and brave, good qualities to have." As January arrived and Theresa's due date approached, Nathan became increasingly attentive. He brought in Mrs. Patterson from town, who was the closest thing Las Animas had to a midwife, and made sure she would be available when the time came. He stocked the house with extra supplies and made sure there was always plenty of firewood split and stacked. "You are going to wear yourself out fussing," Theresa told him one afternoon as he checked for the third time that they had enough clean linens. "I just want everything to be ready," Nathan said. "I have never done this before." "Neither have I," Theresa pointed out. "We will figure it out together." The baby came on a cold January night during a snowstorm. Theresa woke Nathan around midnight, her face pale but determined. "It is time." Nathan moved into action immediately, building up the fire and heating water while Theresa paced the room through the early contractions. He rode through the snow to fetch Mrs. Patterson, and by dawn, the house was filled with the sounds of laboring. Nathan stayed close, holding Theresa's hand when she needed it, bringing her water, wiping her face with a cool cloth. "You are doing so well," he kept telling her. "So strong. Just a little longer." The sun was fully up when Mrs. Patterson finally announced that it was time to push. Theresa gripped Nathan's hand so hard she thought she might break it, but he never flinched, never left her side. And then, after what felt like both an eternity and no time at all, there was a new sound in the room, the sharp, indignant cry of a newborn baby. "It is a boy, Mrs. Patterson announced, quickly cleaning the infant and wrapping him in one of the blankets Theresa had prepared. "A healthy, strong boy." She placed the baby in Theresa's arms, and Theresa looked down at her son with wonder. He had a shock of dark hair and tiny, perfect features. His eyes, when he opened them, were dark blue, though Mrs. Patterson said they might change color later. "He is beautiful," Nathan said softly, looking at the baby with awe. "What will you name him?" Theresa had thought about this long and hard. "Thomas," she said. "Thomas Nathan Emerson." She looked up at Nathan. "If that is all right with you, I want him to have your name as part of his. You have done more for him than his father ever did." Nathan's eyes glistened with moisture. "I would be honored." The next few weeks were a blur of sleepless nights and learning to care for an infant. Nathan proved to be surprisingly good with little Thomas, changing diapers without complaint and walking the floor with the baby when he was fussy so that Theresa could rest. Watching him with her son made Theresa love him even more. When Thomas was 6 weeks old and the worst of winter had passed, Nathan made good on his promise. They bundled up the baby and made the trip into Las Animas to see the lawyer. Mr. Harrison was an older gentleman who listened to Theresa's story with a grave expression. "What your husband did was reprehensible," he said when she finished, "throwing you out in your condition. Colorado law allows for divorce on grounds of extreme cruelty, and your situation certainly qualifies. However, I must warn you that the process will take some time, possibly 6 months or more." "We understand," Nathan said. "We just want it done legal and proper." "There is also the matter of the child," Mr. Harrison continued. "Legally, Thomas is Michael Emerson's son since you were married when he was conceived. However, given that Michael threw you out while pregnant and has made no attempt to support the child, it should be possible to terminate his parental rights as part of the divorce proceedings." "Can Nathan adopt him after?" Theresa asked. "Once we are married." Mr. Harrison raised his eyebrows slightly but nodded. "Yes, that would be possible. One step at a time, though. First, we get you divorced, then we can discuss adoption." They filed the papers that day. As they left the lawyer's office, they nearly ran into Michael Emerson himself coming out of the saloon across the street. He looked worse than Theresa remembered, his face bloated and red from drink, his clothes dirty and unkempt. When he saw her with the baby in her arms and Nathan at her side, his expression darkened. "So there is the whore," he slurred. "Knew you would find another man quick enough. That is bastard you are carrying around." "Watch your mouth, Emerson," Nathan said, his voice low and dangerous. He stepped slightly in front of Theresa, a protective gesture that did not go unnoticed. "Or what? You will defend her honor," Michael laughed bitterly. "She does not have any honor, probably been spreading her legs for you since the day I threw her out." Nathan moved so fast Theresa barely saw it. One moment he was standing beside her, the next he had Michael by the collar and shoved up against the wall of the saloon. "Listen to me very carefully," Nathan said, his face inches from Michael's. "Theresa and the baby are under my protection now. You stay away from them. You do not speak to them. You do not look at them. You do not even think about them. The lawyer has already filed divorce papers on grounds of cruelty. You will sign them when they arrive, and you will do it without causing trouble. Do we understand each other?" Michael's bravado crumbled in the face of Nathan's controlled fury. He nodded jerkily. "Fine. I did not want the lying woman anyway." Nathan released him and stepped back. "Sign the papers, Emerson. That is all you have to do." They walked away, Nathan's hand at the small of Theresa's back, guiding her toward the wagon. Theresa was shaking, but not from fear. Seeing Michael again had not frightened her as she thought it would. Instead, she felt only pity for the broken man he had become, and profound gratitude for the strong, good man walking beside her. "Are you all right?" Nathan asked once they were in the wagon and heading out of town. "I am better than all right," Theresa said. Seeing him just made me realize how lucky I am to have found you." Nathan smiled and reached over to take her hand. "The luck is all mine." The months passed peacefully. Spring brought green grass and new calves, and Thomas grew fat and happy. True to his word, Michael signed the divorce papers without protest, and by August, Theresa was legally free. The divorce decree also terminated Michael's parental rights, citing abandonment and cruelty. Nathan proposed properly on a warm August evening, going down on one knee on the porch with the sunset painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. He presented her with a ring that had belonged to his mother, a simple gold band with a small diamond. "Theresa Emerson, will you do me the honor of becoming my wife? I promise to love you and Thomas with everything I have, to protect you both, to be the husband and father you both deserve." "Yes," Theresa said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They were married in September in the small church in Las Animas, with Catherine and her husband traveling from Denver to attend. Mrs. Patterson and a few other townspeople who had come to know and respect Nathan also attended. It was a simple ceremony, but to Theresa it was perfect. When Nathan kissed her as his wife for the first time, she felt a joy so complete it took her breath away. The adoption papers for Thomas were filed shortly after, and by Christmas of 1884, Thomas officially became Thomas Nathan Tucker, Nathan's legal son in every way that mattered. Nathan treated him no differently than if he had been born to him, loving the boy with a fierce devotion that brought tears to Theresa's eyes. "He is my son," Nathan said simply when Theresa thanked him for being so good to Thomas. "Blood does not make a family, love does." In the spring of 1885, Theresa discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the news was met with joy and excitement rather than fear. Nathan was thrilled, already talking about how Thomas would have a brother or sister to play with. The pregnancy progressed easily, and in December of 1885, their daughter was born, a tiny thing with Nathan's gray eyes and Theresa's dark curls. They named her Catherine Rose Tucker, after Nathan's sister and Theresa's mother. Life settled into a happy rhythm. The ranch prospered under Nathan's capable management, and the family grew closer with each passing season. Thomas thrived, learning to walk and talk and follow his father around the ranch like a shadow. Little Catherine was a bright, cheerful baby who rarely fussed. 2 years later, another son joined the family, whom they named Samuel, and 3 years after that, twin girls that they called Grace and Hope. The house that had once felt too big for one lonely bachelor now rang with the sounds of children laughing and playing. On a warm summer evening in 1892, Theresa stood on the porch watching Nathan teach Thomas, now 9 years old, how to properly rope a fence post. Catherine and Samuel were playing nearby, while the twins toddled around under Mrs. Patterson's watchful eye. The older woman had become a regular visitor and a surrogate grandmother to the children. "You look thoughtful," Nathan said, coming up beside her after finishing the lesson. His hair was showing threads of gray now, and there were laugh lines around his eyes, but he was still the same strong, gentle man who had saved her that stormy night 9 years ago. "I was just thinking how different my life could have been," Theresa said, leaning into his embrace. "If you had not found me that night, if you had not taken me in, I would not have any of this. You would have survived," Nathan said confidently. "You are the strongest person I know, but I am grateful every day that I found you, that you chose to stay with me. You and these children are the best things that ever happened to me. We are a real family now," Theresa said softly. "Not bound by obligation or duty, but by love." "We always were," Nathan replied, kissing the top of her head. "From the moment you came into my life, we were a family." It just took a little time for everything else to catch up. As the sun set over the Colorado plains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and red, the Tucker family gathered on the porch. Nathan pulled Theresa close with one arm while Thomas leaned against his other side. Catherine sat at their feet playing with a doll, while Samuel chased the twins around the yard. The sound of their laughter carried on the evening breeze, a testament to the love and happiness that filled every corner of the ranch. Theresa had learned that sometimes the darkest moments can lead to the brightest futures, that kindness from strangers can change everything, and that real love is not about perfect circumstances, but about choosing each other every single day. She had been thrown out pregnant and desperate, but she had been found by a man whose heart was as vast as the western sky, and together they had built something beautiful. Years later, when her grandchildren asked her to tell them the story of how she met their grandfather, Theresa would smile and begin with the truth, that she had been lost and alone in a storm, shaking with cold and fear when a cowboy found her and said the words that changed her life forever. "Come home with me now." And she had gone home with him, and that home had become everything she never knew she needed, filled with love and laughter and a happiness so deep it could weather any storm. Nathan never once made her feel less than cherished, never gave her reason to regret her choice to stay. He loved Thomas as fiercely as he loved their children born of their union, making no distinction between them. He taught all his sons to treat women with respect and his daughters to know their worth. He built his family on a foundation of love and trust, and that foundation never wavered. As for Michael Emerson, Theresa heard years later that he had died in a brawl outside a saloon in another town. She felt sadness for the man he could have been, but mostly gratitude that his choices had led her to where she truly belonged. Thomas grew up knowing the truth about his birth father, but never doubted who his real father was. The man who raised him, who loved him, who taught him everything important, that was his father in every way that mattered. The Tucker Ranch became known throughout the region not just for its fine cattle, but for the warmth of its hospitality, and the love that was evident in every interaction between its residents. Neighbors would comment on how Nathan and Theresa still looked at each other like newlyweds even after years of marriage, how their children were well-mannered and happy, how the whole place seemed to radiate contentment. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Nathan surprised Theresa with a trip to Denver to visit Catherine. As they rode the train across the plains, their hands linked between them, Nathan turned to his wife with a smile. "You ever regret it? Staying with a simple rancher when you could have gone somewhere else, started completely fresh?" Theresa squeezed his hand and looked at him with all the love she felt shining in her eyes. "Not for a single moment. You gave me everything I needed when I needed it most. Safety, kindness, respect, and love. You gave Thomas a real father and gave me a life I never dreamed possible. How could I regret the best decision I ever made?" "I love you, Theresa Tucker," Nathan said, raising her hand to his lips and kissing it gently. "I love you too, Nathan Tucker. Today, tomorrow, and always." And in that moment, traveling across the same plains where their story had begun nearly 2 decades earlier, both of them knew with absolute certainty that they had found what everyone searches for. A love that endures, a partnership built on mutual respect and devotion, and a happiness that grows deeper with each passing year. The storm that had driven them together had long since passed, but the home they built together would stand forever, a testament to the power of compassion, the strength of love, and the truth that sometimes the greatest blessings come from the most unlikely circumstances. Their children grew up and had families of their own, and the Tucker legacy continued through generations. But it all started on that cold October night in 1883, when a pregnant woman stumbled through a storm, and a lonely cowboy chose kindness over indifference. That single choice, that moment of compassion, rippled outward to touch countless lives, creating a family bound not by blood alone but by the strongest force of all: love freely given and gratefully received.